Sir, you can't sit there. The courtroom deputy's voice echoed sharply across the quiet courtroom just minutes before one of the most anticipated trials in Chicago was about to begin. Dozens of spectators turned instantly. Marcus Hill didn't move. He sat calmly at the defense table, reviewing a stack of legal documents, his expression focused and unreadable. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he replied quietly. The deputy frowned. "That table is reserved for attorneys only. The public seating is behind the rail." Soft laughter spread among spectators. Someone whispered, "He really thought he could sit with the lawyers." Marcus slowly looked up, meeting the deputy's eyes without anger. "I am an attorney." The deputy hesitated, clearly unconvinced. Marcus wore a simple dark suit, nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. Too many watching, he looked too young, too calm, and to some simply out of place. "I'm going to need you to step away," the deputy insisted, louder this time. Phones subtly lifted from the audience. This trial had already attracted media attention, and any drama only added to the spectacle. Marcus closed his folder gently. Around him, prosecutors exchanged amused glances. One of them leaned toward a colleague and muttered, "This should be interesting." Marcus stood slowly, aware that every eye in the room followed him. Years of experience had taught him how quickly assumptions formed and how rarely people questioned them. "Before I move," Marcus said evenly, "perhaps you should check the case file." The deputy shook his head. "Sir, don't make this difficult." A bailiff stepped closer now, signaling escalation. The humiliation felt familiar. Not new, just another version of a moment Marcus had lived through many times before, rooms where people decided who belonged before introductions were even made. The gallery buzzed quietly as whispers spread. "He's not on the legal team. Probably someone trying to get attention." Marcus exhaled slowly, choosing patience over pride. Across the room, reporters prepared their cameras, sensing conflict before trial even began. The prosecutor, Daniel Whitaker, adjusted his expensive tie and watched with mild amusement. He had built a reputation on confidence and victories, and today's case was supposed to be another easy win. The defendant, a young tech entrepreneur accused of financial fraud, sat nervously nearby, confusion written across his face as his supposed lawyer was being asked to leave. "Sir," the deputy said again, firmer now, "step away from the table or we will escort you out." Marcus nodded slightly and gathered his papers. "Of course," he said calmly. Gasps and quiet chuckles followed as he stepped into the aisle, and then the courtroom doors opened. "All rise." The judge entered. Everyone stood immediately. Judge Eleanor Grant took her seat, scanning the courtroom with practiced authority. She paused almost instantly. Her eyes locked onto Marcus standing away from the defense table. Confusion crossed her face. "Why is Mr. Hill not seated?" she asked. The deputy spoke quickly. "Your Honor, he was sitting at counsel's table without authorization." The silence that followed felt heavy. The judge blinked once, then twice. "Without authorization," she repeated slowly. She adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Marcus. "Is Mr. Hill," she said, surprise turning into concern. "Why are you not representing your client?" The entire courtroom froze. The deputy's posture stiffened. The prosecutor's confident expression cracked slightly. Marcus answered calmly, "There seems to have been some confusion, Your Honor." The judge turned sharply toward the deputy. "Confusion? This man is lead defense counsel." The words detonated through the courtroom. A wave of whispers erupted instantly. Reporters scrambled to write. The deputy's face drained of color. I didn't realize." Judge Grant's voice hardened. Clearly, Marcus returned to the defense table quietly, placing his files down as if nothing unusual had happened. But everything had changed. The same spectators who laughed minutes earlier now stared in stunned silence. The prosecutor avoided eye contact. Judge Grant addressed the room firmly. "Let the record reflect that Mr. Marcus Hill, senior partner at Hill & Carter Legal Group, is present and ready to proceed." Recognition spread rapidly. Some reporters whispered his name aloud. Marcus Hill was known for winning impossible cases, a strategist whose courtroom precision had reshaped multiple high-profile trials. The trial began, but tension lingered. Marcus spoke calmly, methodically, dismantling the prosecution's arguments piece by piece. Evidence once presented as undeniable began to look incomplete. Witness testimonies weakened under careful questioning. Every time Marcus stood to speak, the earlier humiliation echoed silently in the room. Hours passed. The confident prosecutor grew visibly frustrated as his case unraveled. During a recess, the same deputy approached Marcus quietly. "Sir, I owe you an apology." Marcus gave a small nod. "I appreciate that. I didn't mean any disrespect." Marcus met his eyes kindly. "Intent and impact are different things." The deputy lowered his gaze, understanding. When court resumed, Marcus delivered a cross-examination so precise that even spectators unfamiliar with legal procedure felt the momentum shift. The defendant's supposed wrongdoing began to appear more like misunderstanding than crime. By the end of the week-long trial, the jury returned a verdict, not guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. The young entrepreneur broke down in relief, thanking Marcus repeatedly. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Marcus, asking about the dramatic start to the trial. He paused before answering. "Today wasn't about me," he said calmly. "It's about remembering that competence doesn't always look like people expect." The clips spread across social media within hours. Millions watched the moment the judge corrected the courtroom. Debates erupted online about bias, assumptions, and professionalism. But Marcus avoided interviews after that. He returned to work quietly, believing real change happened through awareness, not outrage. Weeks later, Marcus entered another courtroom for a different case. The same deputy greeted him at the door with respect and a firm handshake. "Good morning, Counselor." Marcus smiled slightly. No hesitation, no doubt, just professionalism. As he walked toward the defense table, young law students watching from the gallery whispered his name with admiration, not because of status, but because of how he handled the moment when respect was withheld. Marcus sat down, opened his files, and prepared to begin again. Because the greatest victories weren't always the verdicts announced aloud. Sometimes they were the assumptions quietly erased before the trial even started. The courthouse steps were crowded long before the verdict was read, but after the jury announced not guilty, the atmosphere changed completely. Reporters rushed forward, microphones raised, cameras flashing, as Marcus guided his client through the hallway toward a quieter exit. The young entrepreneur walking beside him still looked stunned, as if freedom had not fully registered yet. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. Questions came from every direction. "Mr. Hill, how did you turn the case around? Did the courtroom incident affect your strategy? Do you believe bias played a role today?" Marcus paused briefly, choosing his words carefully. He understood how easily moments like this could become loud headlines instead of meaningful conversations. "My job," he said calmly, "is to make sure facts speak louder than assumptions." Today, the facts finally had space to be heard. That short statement spread across news platforms within hours. Clips of the early courtroom misunderstanding resurfaced online, paired with footage of Marcus delivering precise arguments during trial. Millions watched the contrast. The man who had been asked to leave the lawyer's table becoming the same attorney who dismantled the prosecution's case. But Marcus avoided the spotlight after that day. The following Monday morning, he returned to his office before sunrise, just as he always did. His firm occupied several floors of a downtown building, but Marcus preferred arriving early when the halls were quiet. He placed his briefcase on his desk, loosened his tie, and reviewed new case files waiting for attention. Success had never changed his routine. Growing up, Marcus learned discipline long before recognition ever came. His mother had worked 2 jobs while attending night classes, teaching him that preparation mattered more than applause. Law school had been no different. Long nights, constant doubt, and the feeling of needing to work twice as hard just to be seen as equally capable. The courtroom incident lingered in his thoughts, not because it embarrassed him, but because it was ordinary. That was what troubled him most. Nothing about it had been shocking. It followed a pattern he understood too well. Hesitation, doubt, verification, realization, apology. His assistant knocked gently. "You have a meeting with the interns in 10 minutes? Marcus nodded. "Thank you." The firm had recently started a mentorship program for young law students, many entering professional courtrooms for the first time. When Marcus stepped into the conference room, nervous energy filled the air. A dozen interns sat around the table, notebooks open, clearly intimidated. One student finally spoke. "Sir, is it true what happened in court last week?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Which part?" "The part where they didn't believe you were the lawyer." The room fell quiet. Marcus leaned against the table, thinking carefully before answering. "Yes," he said simply. Another student asked, "Were you angry?" He paused before responding. "I used to be, earlier in my career. But anger doesn't always change outcomes. Preparation does." The interns listened closely. "You will all walk into rooms where people make assumptions about you," Marcus continued. "Sometimes because of age, sometimes background, sometimes appearance. Your responsibility isn't to fight every assumption immediately. Your responsibility is to be so prepared that reality corrects them for you." The advice settled deeply in the room. After the meeting ended, one intern lingered behind a young black student named Daniel who looked hesitant to speak. "Mr. Hill," he said quietly, "seeing what happened, it actually scared me a little. If it can happen to someone like you, what chance do we have?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "It will happen," he said honestly. But moments like that don't define your place in the room. How you respond does. Daniel nodded slowly, visibly reassured. Weeks passed, and the courthouse incident gradually faded from headlines, replaced by newer stories. Yet its impact remained inside the legal community. Judges and court staff quietly reviewed procedures. Training discussions began about professionalism and unconscious bias. Conversations that rarely happened openly were now unavoidable. One afternoon, Marcus returned to the same courthouse for another hearing. As he walked through security, familiar faces greeted him with respectful nods. The deputy involved in the earlier misunderstanding approached him again. "Good afternoon, Counselor," he said sincerely. Marcus shook his hand warmly. There was no resentment left, only mutual understanding. Inside the courtroom, spectators filled the gallery once again, though for a smaller case this time. A group of law students whispered excitedly when they recognized him. Marcus ignored the attention and focused on his client, reviewing notes quietly while waiting for proceedings to begin. Across the aisle, another young attorney prepared nervously, clearly new to trial work. Papers slipped from her hands, scattering across the floor. Without hesitation, Marcus stood and helped gather them. "First, Tra," he asked gently. She nodded, embarrassed. "Is it that obvious?" He smiled. "Only because I remember mine." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "I watched your last case," she admitted. "The way you stayed calm. I hope I can do that someday." "You will," Marcus replied. "Confidence comes from preparation, not experience alone." The judge entered moments later, and court began. Throughout the hearing, Marcus noticed something different. Staff communicated more carefully. Assumptions seemed replaced by professionalism. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, just subtle changes in tone and behavior. Small progress. After the session ended, Marcus stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. The courthouse steps looked the same as always, busy with lawyers, clients, and reporters moving quickly between responsibilities. Life continued forward, unchanged on the surface. Yet Marcus understood something important had shifted beneath it. Real change rarely arrived through loud victories. It grew quietly, through awareness people carried into their next interaction. As he walked toward his car, Marcus received a message from his former client thanking him again, saying the trial had restored not only his freedom but his faith in fairness. Marcus paused for a moment, reading the message twice. That was why he became a lawyer. Not for recognition, not for headlines. For moments when someone's future depended on truth being heard clearly. Later that evening, Marcus visited his mother for dinner, something he tried to do whenever his schedule allowed. She greeted him with a warm hug and immediately asked about work, having already seen news clips online. "I'm proud of you," she said softly as they sat down. Marcus smiled. "You always say that because you always remember who you are," she replied. They talked about ordinary things afterward: family, memories, plans for the weekend. Normal conversations that grounded him far more than courtroom victories ever could. Driving home that night, Marcus reflected on how far life had carried him from those early days of uncertainty. Success had opened doors, but respect, genuine respect, still required patience to cultivate in the world around him. The next morning, he prepared for another case, another courtroom, another opportunity to do the work he loved. And as he walked confidently toward the courthouse entrance once again, people stepped aside naturally, greeting him with professional acknowledgement. No hesitation, no doubt, just recognition earned not through status alone, but through consistency, dignity, and quiet strength. Marcus adjusted his briefcase and continued forward, knowing that every courtroom he entered now carried a small reminder of something important, that justice was not only about laws and verdicts, but about ensuring every person who walked into the room was seen, heard, and respected before a single word of testimony was spoken.